You're listening to... What's the name of this show?
Promotional consideration paid for by the following.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Wrestling Source Radio.
Bret screwed Bret.
This is hold one, arm drag.
I did it for The Rock.
Bischoff, you turn the camera off and I'll be naked when you come back.
Yahtzee! You're welcome.
Go ahead, 1, 2, 3, count them down.
Wrestling Source Radio.
My next guest, he's had many titles: pub manager, music manager, most notably the Divinals from 1987 to 1994, music and festival promoter. Most notable bands that have come out to Australia being Aerosmith, Kiss, Fleetwood Mac, and wrestling promoter. It's a very big welcome to Andrew McManus.
Hello, mate. How are you?
Very, very well. I guess currently you're the CEO of One World Entertainment. A staple for you guys is Under the Southern Stars. We would have seen the likes of Bush, Live, the Stone Temple Pilots. They would have been coming out to Australia, but that had to get cancelled due to COVID-19. I guess, how has it affected you directly and I guess the entertainment industry as a whole?
Well, it's not cancelled, actually. It's only rescheduled. And thankfully, we sort of got wind of what was happening a little earlier than most. And I was actually in London. And I started working on the rescheduling probably a month prior to anyone else's circumstances. And the way it unfolded for me was that, and it's just interesting the way the cards laid, because no one knew it was going to be as bad as what it is right now when we first started looking at rescheduling. And Bush had tours on in October. Live had commitments in America in November. So the first time that I could get all three bands from Live, Bush and Stone Temple Pilots to all coordinate their three schedules was February, March. So hence, that's what I then started planning. And then I started putting together the tour in the same format that we had, for last April just gone, as a plan for February, March. And whether it be good hindsight, luck, or the universe just watching out, it looks like we potentially will be the first festival out of the blocks once international airports open and once the world sort of sees common distancing and things like that as not as big a crisis as what it is as we're currently living right now. So we've got a lot of water to go under the bridge. In essence, and the world has got to have a comfort factor. So we're hoping that by December, international airports are considered to be opened, and then in essence that flows on. Americans, which are probably at this point in time looked upon as high risk because of their situation and how it's being managed over there. But we've got an answer to that, which we're going to put to the government in the next couple of weeks. And if all things go well, we'll be the test case festival. And then everyone, including Central Coast, where you are, we'll get to see Live, Bush, Stone Temple Pilots, Rose Tattoo, and Electric Mary. So I've kept all the bands together.
That's great to hear. Hopefully that does go ahead. Is there a bit of a fear, like I guess, the second cases or the second coming of a COVID-19? I mean, from now on, is there kind of a different procedure that you will go in organising events like this?
Well, I think we've got to get through, and I've got a plan without going into too much detail right now, because it's a plan I want to put to government. Mm-hmm. And I want, at that point in time, if this comes to fruition, as I said, we'll be sort of the test case festival, which it'll be different. And in some part of the entailment will be a 15,000 capacity will only be now capped at 9. So even though it's a green field and it's outdoors, we'll put certain levels of distancing forced upon the actual crowd capacity. The bars will be run differently with certain ways to get in and out of them. There'll be a COVID. My idea is to have a COVID-19 testing, even though by February it'll be hopefully passed. There'll still be an ability to test there, and certain other procedures and protocols that I want to put in place that I think is common sense, which will put the industry on the front foot which will then show what the new normal be of a music festival.
Yeah, I'm hearing that word a lot, the new normal. I don't think we'll sort of really get back to what was normal. There'll be a new normal moving forward.
In time, I think, and again, this is just my opinion, but I think where we are in a little bit of a sort of a better position to be the first ones is because my crowds are more mature age, 35 plus, which is hopefully has got a more common sense attitude and direction towards the actual excitement of being the first festival. Whereas I think if it was a Splendor, or not so much a Splendor, but maybe a Beyond the Valley or some younger kids type, it'd be much, much more difficult to contain and manage and get the actual patrons to follow the rule that you're going to try to set. And I think that would backfire in everyone's face. So hopefully things go the way I'm planning, and hopefully things go the way from a common sense point of view within government circles, and that, come February, we'll be able to open our gates to anywhere between 9,000 and 10,000 people per festival, keeping in mind the actual capacities should be 15 to 20. But, so we'll control the distancing within the festival itself.
Great. So hopefully that all goes ahead. I want to see if you can jump back into a time machine with us, Andrew. March 26, 2001, that's when TNT, they aired their last episode of WCW Monday Nitro, obviously purchased by then WWF and Vince McMahon. People say from the ashes of WCW comes WWA, which you founded probably a mere few months later. Mm-hmm. How does an Australian concert promoter get into the world of professional wrestling?
I always loved wrestling, and from the days when I was going to school, the Killer Carl Coxes, the Spiros Arions, and all those guys, and I sort of grew up on that on Sunday, wrestling with Mike Coote, and it was Mike Cleary, and it was and Father John Coote, and all these great people that sort of blazoned the way for black and white Channel 9 wrestling on a Sunday in our day. And I was actually, I remember it quite well. It was Palm Springs, it was Thanksgiving. I was over at my buddy's house, or holiday house, Doc McGee, who manages KISS. And it came up on the news that Ted Turner was going to fold WCW. And over a few shandies, I suggested that we should get on to Ted, because I knew Doc knew him, and see what he wanted to sell his roster. And basically for $1, I bought all the contracts.
For $1, that's a bargain.
Yeah, but I then had to meet all the obligations thereafter. So, I don't know if it was a bargain or not, but we had a lot of fun with it.
And I guess WCW, they did a tour the year prior, in the year 2000. Were you sort of in connection with anyone organising that, or heard about that?
No. I started, I met with Jeremy Borash and Jeff Jarrett in those early days. And that's sort of that friendship, because I've got an abode in Nashville, and those guys live in Nashville, and Doc was living in Nashville. So we sort of had this friendship, and with their tuition and their guiding and Jeremy's writing, and we had then incorporated other people along the way, is basically how WWA formed. And a collective brains trust in those days was, hey, that was WWF in those days, wasn't going into the UK, yet they had a huge television audience. WCW had a huge television audience, but no one was really going into that market. So we ended up doing 4 tours, and it was more so on the back of the strength of the superstars' names, Sting, Lex Luger's. Yeah, there was some great guys, some scallywags I met along the way. Mr. Perfect, he was a classic, very funny man. And, I create some lifelong friendships out of it.
Hopefully you can speak a little bit more about the scallywags a little bit later on. But I guess from a business standpoint, you kind of touched on it there. WWF wasn't going into the UK, Europe, and Australia. Was that the business model to be a touring company and to go into places where the WWF wasn't going? Was it ever considered to get TV, whether it be New Zealand, Australia, or over in Europe?
The television, well, look, if that ever came, that would have been wonderful. But I did a deal out of Los Angeles with a pay-per-view company. And so every time we toured, we did one pay-per-view. So we did one out of Wembley. We did one out of Vegas. That was a fun one. We brought it down to New Zealand one, and that's where Sting won the title. Out of Auckland. We did one out of Sydney Superdome. So each tour we would have to do, or we'd anchor it around a reason, and we'd start basically the story. So it might be 15 events, and doing Dublin, doing Switzerland, doing Newcastle, Sheffield, Scotland, whatever. And we finished one in Glasgow, which was a spectacular one when we funded that. But no, the fact that WCW under Ted Turner, who had a television network, folded, that proved how difficult it is to keep a brand up on TV.
Because I guess the wrestling model, I guess you can say, is you have a regular TV to promote your house shows, but I guess this was kind of the opposite. You're sort of doing pay-per-views and then house shows. I guess with no sort of regular TV to promote it, you had to, I guess, rely on different ways to promote your show.
We were relying on the talent and the roster and the poster that said, you're going to be seeing, Grandmaster Sexay, you're going to be seeing Scott Steiner, you're going to be seeing all these guys live, in your stadium. And that's what we relied upon very much so. And, the storyline was made up as we went. So, it wasn't like you had a TV formula where you could write a 4 or 5 month plan to get to WrestleMania and have a heel and have a baby face and all the rest of it. We didn't have that luxury. So we had to do it sort of into a very short mode of potentially 4 weeks, and then get to where we ended up being, at the pay-per-view.
Touring Europe, Australia, New Zealand, do you think, you obviously said like that was due to the WWF not going to those sort of markets back then. Do you think it was a mistake to sort of eventually go into the US market?
Possibly looking back at it now, because it really pissed Vince off. And on the way, I had Randy Savage, who's going to be my headliner. And Vince offered him 3 times as much money for him to turn around and go back.
Right.
That was when I'd realised I'd tickled the belly of the gorilla. Like we were the 500-pound gorilla versus the 20-pound monkey.
Yeah.
It was a real eye opener to what we had done, and awakened the giant, so to speak. And then he made sure that he started taking WWF into the UK to squash us, which was sort of the end of our, But we had 3 great years at it. And as I said, 3 great years of building enormous friendships and stories that, I'll take them to grave with these guys,
And I guess according to reports online, you can take it with a grain of salt. Were you in contact with former WWE writer, WCW writer Vince Russo to organise the wrestling side of things?
Early doors, yeah. Vince and I had several meetings when I was in LA, and then I think he got snapped up as well by WWF. But yeah, I was, yeah.
And what were those initial negotiations like? What was your take from Vince Russo, the person?
Oh, maybe we got on well. Look, and because in the early days when he was still a name, but his light dwindled very quickly, after not being on TV. And I think from all reports, and I never got to work with him, in the wrestling world, he had a great wrestling brain, but he also had annoyed quite a bit of my roster, and there was some angst when I started mentioning to some of them that I was bringing him on. So it was like a penny. It was one of those things that just happened. It didn't happen, and it actually is probably best it didn't. And that's when Jeremy Borash stepped up and took over the main writing.
And he suggested Jeremy, is that correct?
No, Jeremy and I had already met in Sydney on doing an event. I'm just trying to think, because I'm trying to remember what we called it, International Wrestling, and Jeff won the title, and Rove McManus was my namesake, but co-commentator. and that was at the Superdome. That was when we met Jeremy, and Jeremy and Jeff and I sort of hit it off. That's when we worked, when the WCW idea came up, they were the first guys I reached out to.
Was there any other, people that you were looking to get in contact with that could potentially fill that role, or it was just worked out well that Jeremy Borash and you and Jeff Jarrett sort of had that connection prior?
No, that was it. Again, I was going into a world that I didn't really know a lot about, other than I saw it in those days in the WWF, market, and it proved it. When we went in that first trip, we broke the house record at the point in Dublin. We ran third in all-time merchandise sales behind Metallica and Garth Brooks, and this is for a little unknown wrestling company. But the Irish just love their wrestling, and it would prove our belief that if I took these names to the UK, it would work. It became sort of a family, and it became even the wrestlers would get in on the matches, and they would help write it. And so it wasn't only Jeremy and Jeff, but it was mainly they were the main two. I stayed out of that. In the latter part, I'd have an opinion or a comment, but I pretty much stayed out of it and let the guys who knew what they were doing do it.
I mean, you look at the roster, some big names that came through WWA. I mean, Jeff Jarrett, Scott Steiner, Sting, Buff Bagwell, Eddie Guerrero, and AJ Styles, who's obviously a big name with WWE now. The list goes on. You sort of touched on Jeremy Borash handling the wrestling side of things, but I mean, was there any talent that tried to hold you up for money, or any issues with any particular talents?
No, it was actually quite fun because I remember after the pay-per-view in Glasgow, Nathan Jones, who was a big Australian boy, he always wanted to be a wrestler, and he was an actor anyway. He was in our headlining match, and he was brutal. He just didn't know how to pull up, and I remember him sitting him down because he came up after the event, and he said, I've been offered a contract with the WWA or WWF. So we sort of got on the phone. I got on the phone. I can't remember the guys' names back there, but they were good guys. And we ended up doing a swap, like it was like a football, two football teams. So I traded Nathan for the Godfather, Perry Saturn, and Gangrel or something. It was like three guys I got. Yeah. And I gave them Nathan.
That's a pretty good deal, I think.
Yeah, and it was just like fun, and that was when I started. And all those type of moments were just great fun, And I ended up getting those guys across, and they ended up being good guys, and we had fun. And they were at the twilight of their careers, but irrespective, half my guys were, so it didn't matter. Yeah. And
you mentioned the Macho Man incident. He was scheduled to, I think, take on Jeff Jarrett for the WWA title, but so. Is it confirmed that Vince McMahon paid him double the amount of money to basically show the event?
Yep. Oh, it may not have been Vince himself.
But someone.
Randy said to me it was Vince who rang him.
For real? Wow.
So I'd take that on, for what he said.
Yeah.
And I remember him ringing me, and I was devastated. He goes, I just got a call from Vince, and he's offered me double, and I've got a family, and I'm out of contract, and he's offering me potential, come back onto, into the company. I've got to turn around. And I went, mate, at the end of the day, you got to do what you got to do. Because, I had a contract with him, but, if he was turning around and wasn't coming, he was turning around and not coming. So there's no point,
Far out. And I guess there's been lots of stories about Randy Savage sort of living the gimmick. Was he Macho Man Randy Savage when you're talking to him, or was he...
Yeah, I went down to Florida a couple of times to meet with him, and he had this Viper motor car, and it was exactly what you expect Randy Savage to drive, this muscle car, and and he was very much in character the whole time, and the voice always got me. It was so deep. Yeah.
I guess another online report which you can dismiss or confirm. Apparently, Scott Hall and Kevin Nash, they were on board to come to WWA, but reports that Kevin Nash became weary of Andrew McManus. Is that just, I guess, a rumor, but they signed a WWE deal instead, or?
Well, I was Well, it was Scott Steiner and Jeff Jarrett. Well, I don't know. I've never heard that one. He was weary of me. But I do remember we were on a train, I think, traveling from Zurich back to London. And Jeff and I are at the back of the train, and we're on the phone to him, and he confirmed he was coming across. And then about a week later, Jeff rang me. He's gone to WWF. Again, it was a little bit much like the what you call anything we were trying to do, and WWF found out about it. They were squashing it.
Because, I mean, they would obviously go on to reform the NWO, and I remember sort of back around that time and thinking, oh, great, reforming the NWO, probably one of the best sort of groups, of the Attitude Era next to DX, but they didn't really do much with them. Do you think, little WWA doing what you guys are doing, but they'll just try to poke holes in everything as much as possible just for the sake of it?
I'd like to say yes, and that's my opinion. But then, if you spoke to them, they probably wouldn't know who we are.
Yeah.
Who we were. But we're on their radar and things like that. And I guess also, if I was Kevin, I'd have been flouting something, an offer like from us underneath Vince's nose, going, just before I go and sign this, just letting you know, knowing the man that Vince is, he'd go, no way in the world, I'll fix, especially now, and especially the story out there about the Randy scenario saga. So I'd pretty well, without, putting my house on it, think that, once WWF got wind of anything we were doing, they were trying to stop it. If it was talent that was valuable or there was any value to it.
And I guess
AJ Styles was ours. He made a name for himself yet, and that's why he was with us on every tour. One
of the more notable guys on the roster, and he didn't even wrestle, was Bret Hart. He was the on-air commissioner for WWA. What was it like dealing with Bret Hart?
A lovely bloke. It was funny, I was in London just recently, and Ed Bicknell, who used to manage Dire Straits, and we met in the foyer of the hotel getting into the big music conference. And he didn't know me for the Divinals manager or concert promoter. He knew me as Bret Hart's friend.
It's pretty good.
And that was his, he goes, I know Bret's speaking about you, I was like, oh, cool, Yeah, no, and Bret was a lovely man.
And because my biggest memory would be seeing Bret Hart on Rove Live, and then obviously the very next day 9/11 happened, and he sort of said at the first pay-per-view he was a little bit stranded in Australia during that time. Did that cause any issues or stifle the first pay-per-view or the tour, 9/11?
Look, well, I remember it well. I know the guys I remember it was Road Dogg and Bret and Buff were all in my room watching it.
Yeah.
They were just terrified. These are big, strong men, absolutely shaking in their shoes, terrified, wondering, what was going on,
Yeah.
And we watched it together, and I remember as plain as anything. And look, it changed the world. It's not unlike what's happening with us today, And did it stifle the pay-per-view? No. We formatted things a little differently. I must admit, if I had my time again, I wish. I just try to remember his name now. Our Arab wrestler. He came out and then he had the American flag on his head and threw it this was in Vegas. And the next thing I had about 15 Marines going to beat the shit out of us.
For real.
They took it as they took it to heart, and they had all entitlement to.
Yeah.
That was pretty hairy.
And I guess with Bret, he was obviously just the on-air commissioner, but was there any talks that he would try to return to the ring, or he'd been medically kind of retired at that point?
There was a guarantee we had to give him, and he gave us that he would never wrestle. He had fusion in his neck, and it only needed one bump, and he was paralyzed for the rest of it. So I would never, put it to him, even if he got, one night excited, Bret, there's no chance.
Yeah, and I guess you can't talk exact figures in that, but would you say someone like a Bret Hart, he was, I wouldn't say a bargain, but value for money?
Well, he got paid, for what he did. It wasn't so much, was he highest paid? No. There was more, the guys who were in the ring actually, doing the dirty work were paid much more. But Bret also realised, he's no fool. He realised his currency as being Bret the Hitman Hart to a fledgling young company. So it was value.
And I mentioned Rove Live there, Rove McManus. Is there a relation there?
Look, we call ourselves second cousins, and we giggle about that. He's from Perth. I've got McManus's over in Perth. We've never really done the tree thing. But I was getting on a plane in LA once, and I checked in, and the lady at Qantas said, "Oh, are you John?" I said, "No, I'm not John. I'm Andrew." She goes, "Oh," and then she said, "Oh, do you want to sit next to John?" And I didn't twig. I go, "No, I don't want to sit next. No way." And then when I was getting on the plane, he was already sat down. I hear this, "Hey, cuz, you don't want to sit with me?" I went, "Oh shit," because I forgot John's his real name,
And he's a big wrestling fan, so was it an easy sell to sort of get on TV for him, or was there much negotiating there, or he was all for it?
Oh, no, he was all for it, and we put him in as the very, very first pay-per-view. I think it was International Wrestling something, or I can't remember. We called it, it was just a make-up, badge. I think Jeff actually hit him over the head with the guitar, his guitar. That was at the Superdome. And he loved it. He milked it for all it was worth. And he's also a major Kiss fan. He comes to my Kiss shows and gets made up in the Kiss makeup, and he's a great guy.
And obviously, Jeff Jarrett, Jeremy Borash, sort of during this time, they were going to form NWA TNA or TNA or Impact Wrestling as we know it now. There was a working relationship there. We saw a lot of the TNA stars like Kazarian, AJ Styles, I think Christopher Daniels, heaps of them on some of these tours with WWA. While it's a working relationship, did it kind of seem there was a bit more, I guess, take than give, or it just was one of those situations it was what it was?
I think your timing's out there. They were with me with WWA.
Yeah.
And the vinyls and a couple of other things in my real world, let's say that, started kicking. And we were getting a belting from Vince in the UK. So I wanted out, and I gave them the WWA roster.
Right.
They then went and they found, I think the name's Dixie, who had some Texas Oil coin, and they started TNA.
Okay.
It grew off WWA.
Yeah, great, because that was kind of the transition. I guess from WCW, you had WWA, and then TNA. And so I guess what was the decision where you sort of wanted to wash your hands of professional wrestling? Was there a particular moment, or it just became too much?
It was Chrissy from the Divinals basically put her foot down, manage ours, because we knew we had hits.
Yeah.
So hits there. And also I had, I saw the writing on the wall with what was happening in the UK, and it was becoming more and more difficult. And even, things were happening behind the scenes with the venues where they weren't even taking out bookings to a degree. It was offering him 10 dates or a huge, stadium so it was just life do I need this in my life? Because it's not my core business. It's not my core, where I saw myself in 10 years, where it's Jeremy and Jeff's world. That's their blood. My blood's music. Their blood's wrestling. It was just something I'm not going to say took it on as a novelty, because it was a business. But at the end of the day, it was very easy for me to let it go and just let the guys have it.
Because I guess, that last pay-per-view at The Reckoning, that's where they unified the WWE titles and the NWA TNA titles, and I guess that was the last show. So there wasn't sort of any emotional farewell to it. You were pretty happy just to move on.
Look, I'm just disappointed I couldn't make it. I can't remember where I was, but they invited me there, and it was sort of the passing of the torch type of thing. And I sent them the belts and everything that we had, and Jeremy and I. It's funny, I spoke to Jeremy about 3 days ago. He's gone full circle, left Nashville, and now he's back down in Orlando working for WWE.
Was it true that was Jeremy living in Australia in the first few months or years of WWA?
He stayed at my house at Burleigh. Yeah.
And how did he adapt to the Australian culture, I guess you could say?
But he's just such a character, and he's such a beautiful guy. And he adapted it to as much as it adapted to him. Yeah. I used to call him Radish. He was just like this cheeky little brat. Yeah.
Radish. And I guess sort of more recently with news involving WWA, 2017, you sold it to Wade Brewer. Was there, you held it for so many years, I guess, that brand. Was there a reasoning for selling it then, or?
No reason. He approached me, made me an offer, and it was just sitting in the drawer. And I went, buddy, make me an offer, and he did, and I went, okay, done.
From 2003 to 2017, was there any, I guess, inkling or desire to sort of start it back up? Maybe not on such a big scale, but as a more independent, small thing?
No, not at all.
No.
Not from my point of view. And I saw, because I stay in touch with Jeremy and Jeff, and I saw how hard they struggled and how difficult it was for them to try to do TNA and TNT or all the other brandings they Impact, and it was not an easy day for them. Yeah, they struggled.
And I guess having those guys, because I know, I'm pretty sure Jeff Jarrett, he's a producer / agent, as is Jeremy. Is there any collaboration, I guess, when Australia or the WWE does Australian tours to get you on board to help out with that?
No. Dainty signed a contract with the WWE some time back as their promoter, and that pretty well shuts the door on me because there's no let's just say love amongst the promoters and helping each other out here unless it's crisis.
Absolutely. Okay. I guess you're talking about sort of funny stories or stuff that you'll potentially go to the grave with. Is there any funny stories that you could tell about the experience, I guess, from 2001 to 2003?
Well, if you had hours, I could, yeah.
Any that come to mind straight away that you can say on air?
Yeah, I remember one of the funny ones. We had these two coaches, and Jeff was on team captain on one, I was team captain on the other, and one of the conquistador, macho libre style Mexican wrestlers we had on. Anyway, and he couldn't speak much English, and we pulled under this bus, coach stop. And I said to Jeff, you got everyone on board, yours, head count? Yep. I went, I'm sweet. So we took off, and about half an hour down the road, there's these two girls in this MG rooftop, this mad Mexican waving out, because we left him, and then somehow he made conversation with them that he was a wrestler. The two coaches had left him, and he needed a ride. And that was, So then we finally got to another down the road, and I think it was an off day. So we ended up pulling into this tavern, and the two buses were in the car park. And we went inside, and next thing you know, I think Grandmaster Sexay's come out with like a tray of about 50 shots.
Oh, wow.
So we're all having shots and all having a great old time. And then it was Booker T's partner.
Stevie Ray.
Stevie Ray. So Stevie Ray he used to play college football. Grandmaster Sexay used to play college football. So they're having this, drunken, who's the fastest. So we all went out to the car park, and on the, adjudicator, on your set, go. Anyway, so they run down the car park to 100 metres. Stevie Ray's hammy's gone. Grandmaster can't stop, and he's run straight in the front of the coach. Caved in the whole front of it. Because it's his barrel of muscle, and literally caved in the whole front, smashed the window, and thankfully it wasn't our coach.
And Grandmaster Sexay there, the son of Jerry the King Lawler, who was with the company for a short period of time. What was the King like to deal with?
If you read in some of his books, he's made mentions of me, which weren't as polite as what I thought they could have been. But I'm not going to diss him. I found him to be quite easy to get along with, and he I think he thought he lived with the crown on his head inside and outside of the arena. But he was fine.
And I guess Grandmaster Sexo, he was sadly passed on, Brian Christopher, but I have to say, I think it was 2003, one of my biggest memories was him, Scott Steiner, and I think Medeja on the NRL footy show.
Yeah.
And Paul Vaughton, I think he's done it a few times with some wrestlers that's come over. He's mispronounced names, all that, but a bit of an awkward kind of segment with, Dead or Alive or whatever, that obviously the main part of it, I guess, was Scott Steiner picking him up over his head and throwing him over the set.
Well, that was all organised.
Yeah, and I guess they were pretty fun and easy to deal with that.
Oh yeah, that was great. Like Scotty, I remember being in Vegas. It was funny. We did the sort of run through, and Puppet and Tio was supposedly going to have their match, and they did the whole thumbtack thing, and then Scotty was going to come down and grab Puppet and throw him into the fifth row, and we had the fifth row ready to go. Of course, then the live event happens. Scotty's all pumped up, and he's had a couple of his protein shakes, and he runs down, he grabs Puppet, and he's hurled him. And these poor guys in the row 5 just watched him go over the top, and was taking out row 10.
Because
that wrestler, Puppet midget.
Because he's a polarizing figure, Scott Steiner, and I know one of the latest Vice episodes with Dark Side of the Ring with David Schultz and the reporter, calling it fake and sort of slapping him around. I thought Scott Steiner would sort of be of the old school mentality sometimes, but he obviously was pretty easy to work with in that regard.
Oh, definitely, and like he could be gruff, but he also had a heart of gold. And he called it the business. It's all the business, and it was all about the business, And I loved him. He was a great man. Brother Rick, he was soft. He was more mobile, but Scotty, he had the power,
And I guess, do you sort of stay in tune with what's happening with WWE or any sort of wrestling, or you sort of dropped off a bit?
I don't really, because I've got so many other things going on with the music festivals and everything else in my world. Occasionally, I'll catch a Raw or something on TV, and I must admit, I watched it. I was sort of mesmerised by it the other night. I just somehow clicked over it, and with no crowd, and it's just so dead,
It's so bizarre watching an event like wrestling to have no crowd. It really does sort of say, I guess, the crowd is kind of like they're as much as the participant as the competitors.
It is the show. It just shows you how much. And again, now without the crowd, you don't need the big lights and the pyrotechnics and the video and all the rest of it. So it was just I was a bit gobsmacked, and it saddened me a little bit, to be honest with you. Because I know how hard the guys work, and they run off the crowd. And that it was, as I said, when Scotty, the difference between Scotty at rehearsal and Scotty when the arena was full was the two different guys, and you could see, it was, and they run off it, and it's must be so much harder for them.
I guess you could say Australia has a few sort of hotbeds, especially in Sydney and Melbourne with the independent scene. Obviously, they're sort of big within, I guess you could call them territories. Could something like a WWA or could wrestling become as big as it was in the early 2000s again? Do you sort of see that ever coming on the radar, or it's so impossible with the big companies over in the States? Difficult
for me to answer that because I don't track the ratings anymore. I don't really follow. You got. I suppose you look at the Vince's share price, and it's still up there. So he's a genius at being able to keep that alive and as strong from endorsements and advertisers and whatever for as long as he has, and his writings and the market and the camps and the educations of the younger guys coming through. And it's a university of knowledge now. To say that could happen here, I would look again. As I said, I'm not really in a position to comment. But an opinion-wise, I'd say it'd be very difficult.
Yeah. Before we wrap up there, Andrew, what can we plug? What can we promote? What does the promoter want to promote at the end of this conversation?
Hey, look forward to seeing Kiss at the end of 221. There's a bunch of other tours we'll have between August and which I'm just tidying up now. And Under the Southern Stars 220, which is now February, March 221, with live Bush Stone Temple Pilots, will be here.
Andrew McManus, it's been great chatting to you about wrestling, and hopefully when this whole COVID-19 stuff has hopefully moved on, we can get back to getting big bands out here to Australia and get the live music scene up and pumping again.
Joel, it's been an absolute pleasure, and anytime.
He's got him in the corner, and here we go. Oh, that's gotta hurt.
Wrestling Source Radio.